You've felt this before. That moment of clarity, that impulse for change, that deep desire for things to be different, and yet for most people, the results barely change. This video is not about motivation. It's not about willpower. It's not about discipline. It's about something that psychology, neuroscience, and consciousness studies point to as the real mechanism behind change, or the lack of it. Because there's a truth you may have already felt, but haven't named yet. Change doesn't begin with effort. It begins with awareness. And most people never develop this awareness. They wake up, think, and move through the day from the same mental and emotional patterns they've always carried. And patterns, when repeated, always reproduce the same results. This video is an invitation to pause and observe, to understand why change seems difficult and why it doesn't have to be. No pressure, no hype, just clarity. Let me ask you a direct question. How many times have you felt that initial motivation, that certainty that this time would be different, and then, a few weeks or months later, realized you were exactly in the same place? You're not alone. In fact, you're in the majority. Research shows that approximately 92% of people cannot maintain changes that begin with motivation. And this doesn't happen because they're weak. It doesn't happen because they don't have enough discipline. It happens because of something much deeper. It happens because motivation is a temporary state. It's based on emotion. And emotions, by nature, are fleeting. They rise, they fall, they change. But your identity, who you believe you are, doesn't change with emotion. It remains. It's constant. And it's your identity that determines your results, not your motivation. Let me give you a practical example you'll recognize. You decide you're going to save money. You're motivated, you create a plan, you start saving. But after a few weeks, something happens. You find yourself spending on something you didn't plan, and you think, just this once, no problem. But it's not just this once. It's the pattern reasserting itself. Why? Because your identity is still, I'm someone who can't save money. And as long as that identity exists, your actions will always return to it. Always. Or another example. You decide you're going to exercise regularly. You're motivated. You join a gym. You go a few times. But then something happens. You miss one day, then another. And before you realize it, you've stopped completely. Why? Because your identity is still, I'm not an active person. And as long as that identity exists, your actions will always return to it. Always. Motivation can get you to start, but only identity can keep you consistent. And here's what's even more revealing. You may not be conscious of your identity. You may not have named it, but it's there, operating silently, determining your choices, creating your results. Dr. Bruce Lipton, a cellular biologist, discovered something revolutionary. Your cells don't respond to your genes, they respond to your beliefs. And your beliefs are what form your identity. So if you believe you're someone who can't save money, your cells, your brain, your behavior, everything operates from that belief. And that's why change is so difficult when you try to do it with motivation alone. Motivation is like a wave. It rises, it falls. But your identity is like the ocean. It's constant, it's deep, and it determines what floats on the surface. Now let's understand the mechanism, because when you understand the mechanism, you gain power over it. Your mind has two main parts, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. The conscious mind is the part you use to think, plan, make decisions. It represents only 5% of your mental activity. But the subconscious mind, which represents 95% of your mental activity, is where your beliefs, your patterns, and your identity are stored. And here's the problem. Your conscious mind may want to change. It can create goals, make plans, make decisions based on motivation. But if your subconscious mind still believes in the old identity, it will sabotage everything. It will find ways to pull you back to old patterns. It will protect the identity it knows, even if that identity is limiting you. It's as if your subconscious mind were a very efficient security system. It was programmed to keep you safe by keeping you in what's familiar. And what's familiar is your current identity. So every time you try to change with motivation alone, without changing identity, It activates the alarm system. It creates resistance. It generates fear. It produces thoughts like, "This won't work. You can't do it. You're not capable." And that's why motivation disappears, not because you're weak, not because you don't have willpower, but because your subconscious mind is protecting the old identity. Dr. Joe Dispenza explains this through neuroplasticity. Your brain is like a forest with well-defined paths. The old paths are your thought patterns, your habits, your identity, and your brain prefers to use those paths because they're easy, familiar, safe. But when you start thinking new thoughts, feeling new feelings, acting in new ways, you're creating new paths. And at first these new paths are difficult. They require effort. They're uncomfortable. But if you persist, if you keep using these new paths, they become easier. And eventually they become the main paths. And when that happens, your identity changes. The problem is that most people try to create new paths with motivation alone. And motivation, as I said, is temporary. So when motivation disappears, they go back to the old paths. And the old paths become even deeper. But when you change identity first, when you develop awareness about who you're being, the new paths form differently. They form from a new foundation. And that new foundation is more stable, more permanent, more real. Neville Goddard understood this at a deep spiritual level. He said that imagination creates reality. But what he was really describing is the scientific process of how your identity creates your experience. When you imagine something with enough clarity, with enough emotion, your brain can't distinguish between imagination and reality. The same neural pathways are activated. The same chemicals are released. The same programming occurs. So, if you can imagine being the person who already has what you desire, with enough clarity and emotion, your brain begins to operate as if that were already real. And when your brain operates as if something is real, your actions change, your decisions change, your reality changes. But here's what's crucial. You can't just think about it. You need to feel it, because your subconscious mind doesn't understand words. It understands feelings. It understands vibrations. It understands energy. And that's why motivation alone doesn't work. Motivation is mainly thought, but real change requires feeling. It requires that you become, not just that you do. And here's a question that can change everything. If you knew exactly which patterns are creating your current results, would you keep repeating them? Bob Proctor called this vibration. He taught that everything in the universe is energy vibrating at different frequencies. Your thoughts are vibrations, your feelings are vibrations. And like attracts like, when you match the frequency of what you desire, you don't need to chase it. It comes to you. But how do you change your vibration? How do you change your identity? The answer lies in developing awareness. Awareness about who you're being. Awareness about which patterns you're repeating. Awareness about how your current identity is creating your results. Because you can't change something you don't recognize. You can't transform something you don't see. And that's why most people get stuck in the same cycle, repeating the same patterns, getting the same results. They try to change results without changing the identity that creates those results. They try to change actions without changing the beliefs that create those actions. They try to change the future without changing the present. But the present is what creates the future. And the present is determined by your identity, by your awareness, by your internal state. And here's another question. If your current identity is creating your current results, what would a new identity create? Dr. Bruce Lipton proved this through his research in epigenetics. He discovered that your genes don't control your biology, your beliefs control. Your cells respond to your perception of reality, not to your genetic code. So, if you believe you're abundant, your cells operate from abundance. If you believe you're healthy, your cells operate from health. If you believe you're capable, your cells operate from capability. This means you're not limited by your genes. You're limited only by your beliefs. And beliefs can be changed, but only when you develop awareness about them. Maxwell Maltz, a plastic surgeon in the 1950s, discovered something fascinating. When he performed surgeries that changed a person's appearance, it took exactly 21 days for the patient to stop seeing their old face in the mirror and start recognizing the new one. But here's what's even deeper. It also took 21 days for the patient's personality to change, to match the new appearance. Maltz realized it wasn't just about physical change, it was about identity change, and that's why change is so difficult when you try to do it with motivation alone. You're trying to change everything at once. You're trying to create a new identity in one day. But identity doesn't work that way. Identity forms through consistent repetition, through daily practice, through small changes that accumulate over time, and through awareness. Awareness about who you're being, awareness about what you're repeating, awareness about how your patterns are creating your results. But here's the good news. You don't need to wait 21 days to start seeing results. Some people see changes in the first week. Some see changes in the first few days. Because once you develop awareness, once you change your identity, once you align with your goals in consciousness, the outer world has no choice but to reflect that alignment. It's a law, not a suggestion, a law. And laws don't care about your past. They don't care about your circumstances. They don't care about what you think is possible. They simply respond to your vibration. They respond to your identity. They respond to your awareness. Now let's move to the practical part, because understanding is important, but applying is transformative. And it's in application that real change happens. I'll guide you through specific techniques based on the teachings of the greatest masters of manifestation and personal transformation. But before we begin, let me ask you a question. What would happen if, in the next few minutes, you discovered exactly how to reprogram your identity? What would your life be? Like if you could change who you're being, not just what you're doing. Each technique has a purpose, each technique has a method, and each technique works when applied with awareness. And let's start with something fundamental. Before you can change anything, you need to see what's happening. Because you can't change something you don't recognize. This first practice is about developing awareness. Awareness about your patterns, awareness about your identity, awareness about how you're creating your results. It's a calm practice, contemplative, without judgment. You're not trying to fix anything yet. You're just learning to see. Here's how to do it. For the next 3 days, you're going to observe. Just observe. Without trying to change anything, without trying to fix anything, just observe. Every morning when you wake up, ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? What's the first thought that comes to my mind? And write it down. Don't judge. Just write it down. Throughout the day, whenever you catch yourself reacting to something, ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What emotion is present? And write it down. Don't try to change, just observe. Before going to sleep, ask yourself, who was I today? What identity did I express? And write it down. Don't try to be different, just recognize. After 3 days of observation, you'll begin to see patterns. You'll begin to recognize your current identity. You'll begin to understand how your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions are creating your results. And when you see this, when you recognize this, you gain power over it. Because you can't change something you don't see. But when you see it, you can choose differently. And here's a question that can guide you. What would you discover about yourself if you observed your patterns without judgment for 3 days? Common mistake. People skip this step because they want to change immediately. But skipping this step is like trying to navigate without knowing where you are. You need to know where you are before you can go where you want to be. Now that you've observed your patterns, let's identify your current identity. Because your identity is what's creating your results, always, without exception. This is the part that requires courage, direct honesty. Because you're going to look at something you might prefer not to see, but it's necessary. Here's how to do it. Grab a notebook and write the answer to this question. Who am I in relation to your goal? For example, if your goal is financial prosperity, ask, who am I in relation to money? Be honest, be brutally honest. Because your subconscious mind already knows the answer. It just needs you to recognize it consciously. So write, I'm someone who always struggles with money. I'm someone who never has enough. I'm someone who doesn't deserve prosperity. This may be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Because you can't transform something you don't recognize. And when you write these beliefs, you bring them into the light. And when you bring them into the light, you can change them. After writing your current identity, ask yourself, how is this identity creating my current results? And write it down. Because when you see the connection between your identity and your results, you understand why nothing changes when you try to change with motivation alone. Common mistake. People skip this step because it's uncomfortable. But skipping this step is like trying to build a new house without demolishing the old one first. You need to clear the ground before you can build something new. Now, let's define who you need to be. This is the powerful part. Hopeful, transformative. Because you're creating a new identity based on who you want to become, not on who you were. Neville Goddard had a specific technique for this. He called it assumption. You're going to assume the identity of the person who already has what you desire, not in the future. Now, here's how to do it. On the same page of your notebook, write, "Who am I now in relation to your goal?" And write in first person, in the present, as if it were already true. For example, I'm someone who attracts prosperity easily. I'm someone who always has more than they need. I'm someone who deserves abundance. Don't write, "I want to be," or "I will be." Write, "I am," because your subconscious mind doesn't understand future. It only understands present. So you need to speak in the present, even if it's not yet your physical reality. And here's what's crucial. You need to feel this, not just think, feel. Because feelings are the language of the subconscious. So when you write, "I'm someone who attracts prosperity easily," you need to feel the emotion of already having prosperity. You need to feel gratitude. You need to feel security. You need to feel abundance. Common mistake. People write the new identity but don't feel it. They just think about it. But thought without feeling doesn't create change. It's the combination of thought and feeling that reprograms the subconscious. Neville Goddard had another powerful technique. He called it imaginal acts. And that's exactly what it is. You're going to imagine a scene that implies your desire is already fulfilled. This is a creative practice, vivid, sensory. You're going to use your imagination deliberately, with clear intention. Here's the step-by-step method. Every morning before doing anything else, find a quiet space. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and breathe deeply 3 times. Now, imagine a specific scene, not a vague scene, a specific scene. A scene that implies your new identity is already active and your goals are already achieved. For example, if your new identity is "I'm someone who attracts prosperity easily," imagine a specific scene. Maybe you're opening your bank account and seeing the exact amount you desire. Maybe you're receiving a check in the mail. Maybe you're having a conversation with someone who's offering you an opportunity that leads to that income. The scene doesn't matter as much as the feeling. When you imagine this scene, you must feel the emotion of already having this. Feel the security, feel the freedom, feel the relief, feel the gratitude. Make it so real that if someone walked into the room, they would see a smile on your face. They would see peace in your posture. They would see the energy of someone who has already achieved their goal. Neville said you should do this in the state akin to sleep, that space between being awake and dreaming. It's when your conscious mind steps back and your subconscious mind becomes receptive. Do this for 5 minutes every morning. Consistency is the key, because it's through repetition that new neural pathways form. It's through repetition that new beliefs install. It's through repetition that a new identity is born. Common mistake. People do this once or twice and expect results. But identity change requires consistency. You need to do this every day for at least 21 days for your brain to start operating from the new identity. Neville Goddard had another powerful technique that many people ignore. He called it revision. And it's about reviewing your day and changing any experience that isn't aligned with your new identity. This is a reparative practice, transformative. You're not just accepting what happened, you're choosing how it will be remembered. Here's how to do it. Every night before going to sleep, review your day. And if something happened that isn't aligned with your new identity, maybe you had a setback, maybe someone said something negative, maybe you made a decision that doesn't correspond to the person you're becoming, revise it. In your imagination, replay the entire scene, but this time, Play it the way you wanted it to happen. If someone said something that triggered you, revise it. In your imagination, hear them saying something supportive. Feel the emotion of that revised version. Make it so real that your subconscious can't tell the difference. This isn't about living in denial. This is about reprogramming your subconscious. Because your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what really happened and what you imagine happened. It only knows what you tell it. And when you consistently tell it that your reality works in alignment with your goals, it begins to create that reality. Dr. Bruce Lipton discovered that your cells respond to your beliefs, not to your genes. And your beliefs are formed by your memories. So, if you can change your memories through revision, you can change your beliefs. And if you can change your beliefs, you can change your biology. And if you can change your biology, you can change your reality. Common mistake. People think revision is about denying reality. But it's not. It's about reprogramming the subconscious to create a new reality. It's about telling your brain, this is how my reality works now. Now, let's talk about keeping your new identity active throughout the day. Because identity isn't something you assume once and forget. It's something you need to keep conscious. This is a present practice, conscious. You're bringing your new identity into the current moment repeatedly until it becomes natural. Here's how to do it. Whenever you have a moment, maybe you're waiting in line, maybe you're driving, maybe you're taking a shower, ask yourself, how would the version of me who has already achieved my goals feel right now? Don't think, feel. How would that version of you feel? What energy would they carry? What confidence would they have? What peace would they experience? And then, feel that feeling. Now, not tomorrow. Not when you achieve your goals. Now. Because when you feel the feeling of your goals being complete, you're matching their frequency. And when you match their frequency, you attract them into your reality. Do this several times throughout the day. Because each time you do this, you're strengthening the new identity. You're creating new neural pathways. You're reprogramming your subconscious. And here's a question to reflect on. How many times a day are you willing to feel as if you've already achieved your goals? Common mistake. People do this once a day and expect results. But anchoring requires repetition. The more you practice feeling the new identity, the more real it becomes. And the more real it becomes, the more your actions change automatically. And finally, let's talk about action. Because identity without action is just fantasy. But identity with action is manifestation. This is the practice that completes the cycle. Determined, complete. You're not just thinking or feeling. You're acting from the new identity. Here's what you're going to do. Every day ask yourself, what would the version of me who has already achieved my goals do today? Not tomorrow, today, now. And then do it. Not because you're trying to get something, but because you already are this person. And this person naturally does these things. For example, if your new identity is I'm someone who attracts prosperity easily, ask, what would someone who already has prosperity do today? Maybe that person would invest in themselves. Maybe that person would say no to something that isn't aligned. Maybe that person would take a specific action that the old person wouldn't take. And then, do it. Because when you act from the new identity, you're confirming to your subconscious that this identity is real. And when your subconscious believes it's real, it begins to create circumstances that correspond to that identity. But here's what's crucial. You're not taking action to get something. You're taking action because you already are this person. There's a profound difference. One comes from lack, the other comes from completeness. Common mistake. People try to force actions that aren't aligned with their current identity. But this creates resistance. Instead, first change the identity, and then the actions will come naturally. Now that you know the techniques, let's talk about how to integrate them into your real life. Because knowledge without application doesn't create transformation. First, understand that identity change doesn't happen overnight. It happens through consistent practice, so be patient with yourself. But also be persistent. Second, expect resistance. Your old mind will try to pull you back. It will create doubts. It will generate fear. It will produce thoughts like, this won't work, you can't do it, you're not capable. When this happens, don't fight it. Recognize it. And then breathe. and return to your new identity. Repeat your affirmation with feeling. Feel the emotion of the person who already has what you desire, and then continue. Third, start small. You don't need to change everything at once. Choose one area of your life. Choose one identity to transform, and focus on that, because focus creates power, and power creates results. Fourth, create a morning ritual. Every morning before doing anything else, do your imaginal act. Feel your new identity. And then ask, what would the version of me who has already achieved my goals do today? Fifth, review your day every night. Before going to sleep, review any experience that isn't aligned with your new identity. Change it in your imagination. Feel the emotion of the revised version. And then sleep, knowing you're reprogramming your subconscious. Sixth, be consistent. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to be consistent, because it's through consistency that new neural pathways form. It's through consistency that new beliefs install. It's through consistency that a new identity is born. And finally, trust the process. Transformation happens in the invisible before it appears in the visible. So even if you don't see immediate results in your outer world, know that the work is happening where it matters most. In your subconscious mind, in your vibration, in your identity. And when your identity changes, your outer world has no choice but to reflect that change. It's a law, not a suggestion. A law. We've reached the end of this exploration together, but really we've reached the beginning, because what you've learned here isn't just a method, it's a way of seeing, it's a way of understanding, it's a way of creating awareness. You're not becoming something new, you're remembering who you've always been. You're not creating a new reality, you're aligning with the reality that already exists in your consciousness. You're not becoming, you're being. And that being, that identity, that vibration, that awareness is what creates everything. Motivation can get you to start, but only awareness can keep you consistent. Only awareness can create real change. And now you have the tools, you have the techniques, you have the understanding. Everything you've experienced here is complete in itself. These ideas, these moments of awareness, and this state you're entering now don't depend on anything else. For those who feel called to organize these practices more clearly, to return to them day after day with intention and consistency, I've created a simple, practical guide. It brings together the techniques you've explored here in a calm and structured way, so you can integrate them naturally into your daily life. You'll find it through the link in the pinned comment below, offered at a symbolic value that helps support this work and allows this content to continue. Whether you choose to access it or not, know this. Tonight, something has already changed. You're not the same person who started listening. And as you move toward rest, allow this new awareness to settle silently within you. Because change doesn't begin with effort. It begins with awareness, and you've already begun. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next video.